No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on iTunes. On this Thoughtful Thursday, I want to talk about something that I think is pretty cool. I came across an article on Gallup's website. I explore that website often. I think they have a lot of really cool data-driven articles and analytics, and I'm kind of a data-driven person when it comes to making decisions on leadership. I kind of want to know the broader kind of implications as opposed to just thinking about my own personal experience. And one of the articles I came across was around burnout, but it's 5 years old, and it talks about the 5 causes of burnout. And I was reading through them, and I had to go back and look at the beginning to see what the date was because I didn't know if it was a current article or an old article. It says that the 5 main factors that lead to employee burnout are unfair treatment at work, unmanageable workload, lack of role clarity, lack of communication and support from manager, and unreasonable time pressure. I don't know. Was this written yesterday or was this written 5 years ago?
Yeah, I think these are pretty accurate to today as well. Like when I think about the pillars of specifically in leadership and like what I think this is about, like in burnout, you know, it says it's about the workplace, not your people. What I think the article should say is like it's about leadership, not your people, because like unfair treatment at work, like who's treating them unfairly? Right? Who's giving them an unmanageable workload? Who's not providing clarity? Who's not communicating and then support from the manager? And then who's providing unreasonable time pressure? Like at the end of the day, we can say the word workplace, like we can say that a company creates a culture, but what the reality is like leaders and people do that, and leaders are the ones who have to look at these types of things and understand and look in the mirror and then go in and address the things from a workplace standpoint that could be causing this to happen. And again, sometimes it's not just a quote unquote bad leader or somebody who is like unfairly treating people a certain way at work. Sometimes there are things within the work systems, or sometimes there are things that are expected of employees today or of ways of getting things done that because of certain aspects of the workplace makes it easier for some and harder for others. So again, I think that a lot of this is about leadership and people, but I don't necessarily disagree that these are any different today than they were back when this article came out.
Yeah, I'm kind of reading through these things also and thinking that a lot of it really is about leaders, all of them, not just unfair treatment at work, unmanageable workload. I mean, yes, have I put more work on myself than I should have at sometimes? Sure. But in most situations, an unmanageable workload, the implication is that the leadership is putting too much work on somebody. Lack of role clarity. I mean, we've been talking about that since day one on this podcast, the importance of what does your role mean? What are your responsibilities? What are you accountable towards? And are you clear on what these expectations are? If you're not clear on what the expectations are, that leads to an unmanageable workload, because then you start doing work that maybe you shouldn't be doing. You're adding things to your plate that you shouldn't be adding because you think this is part of your workload, or that it should be, when in actuality, you're just unclear about what your actual role is or what the expectations are. And then lack of communication and support from manager and unreasonable time pressure. Same thing. Unreasonable time pressure is the same thing as unmanageable workload. You take the same workload and give me twice as much time, and then you've solved both at the same time. Lack of communication and support from manager. To me, that's the same thing as lack of role clarity and unfair treatment. It's this all comes down to leadership. And if a person is burning out in a role, I would think this list implies that the very first place you should look at is, what is the relationship between them and their direct leader? What is the relationship between them and maybe 1-2 levels up in leadership, and whether or not that's a good relationship. If it's not one, other things tend to fall. That's kind of like the first domino that has to fall, is the relationship with the leader. If that's in place, a lot of these other things tend to go away because they are manageable if you have a good relationship with your leader. And so the question I want to ask you, Lorenzo, is, of these 5 things in this article, unfair treatment at work, unmanageable workload, lack of role clarity, lack of communication support from manager, and unreasonable time pressure. Which of these 5 things do you think is the most pressing in today's environment? They all have an impact, but in the work that you're doing and the people that you've seen where this has been an impact for them, what are you hearing as the thing that kind of stands out amongst these 5 as the thing leading to the most amount of burnout by people? So I want to ask you that, but first I want to get up to word from one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, what do you think is the single biggest cause of burnout of these 5 things? The one that might lead to the most amount of people, leaving or disengaging or just reporting that they just can't do this anymore?
It's funny because I think I want to clump them all together to a degree, kind of like you did. And if you read through the article, it asks some questions that I think we actually, fast forward 4 years, that we've had some dialogue around answering these questions. And the questions are, why does our work environment lack the conditions for them to flourish? And how can I make it safe for them to work here every day from the context of the leader? Like, what do you do? And now I think about over the last 4 years, how much we've talked about the feeling of included and welcomed, and the diversity of a team, and conditions for people to be authentic and to flourish. And then we've talked a lot about psychological safety, creating cultures and environments where people feel that they can express how they're feeling, what's going on, the points of frustration, that they feel that they can do their best work, that they have the support of their leader and their manager. And when you think about those 2 things to me, so like truly feeling more inclusive and really being able to see and understand people for who they authentically are and appreciate the uniqueness of what they bring, along with creating a place where we can have some real dialogue about what the team needs, what individuals need, what are things that help them be motivated and inspired, what are the things that may be triggers for them to shut down. You start to have these conversations, and now you can really talk about the idea of having there be more fair treatment at work, more understanding of what do people need to be successful, of dialogue around workload and what's achievable, but also what is motivating, what may be pushing them to do more, but not over pushing them to feel burned out. Having dialogue and conversation around clarity of the work, of the role, of expectation. So for me, I think that's what has happened over the last 4 to 5 years in those 2 spaces. That I think that's where I would that's where I would kind of boil it down to, is that, are we a more inclusive, more welcoming, more open workplace? And are we creating spaces for our people to talk about times when they are frustrated, when they are unclear, or when they are not feeling like they're getting what they need to be the most successful?
Yeah, what I'm hearing here, and I think this is almost like going from a 101 level to a 201 level in a class on this. It seems like, maybe the difference between 4 or 5 years ago and today with regard to employee burnout is these 5 things were viewed 5 years ago as the cause of burnout. And in actuality, the learnings that we've had over the last 5 years around what the expectations of leaders should be and the skills that leaders should be indexing on higher than they have been in the past, really what it says is that these 5 things are not causes of burnout. These 5 things are symptoms of a broader leadership problem that will ultimately lead to burnout. And so the problem isn't unreasonable time pressure. The problem isn't lack of communication and support or unmanageable workload. The problem is poor leadership. And poor leadership and poor leadership relationships with people. The symptoms of that situation would be these things. People feel like they're being treated unfair, or they don't feel like they're included. They feel like their workload is unmanageable. I've had leaders where I've had massive amounts of workload, but because the relationship was so good and the support was so good, I didn't feel burnt out. And then I've had other instances where the workload was a lot lower, but I felt like I was burning out because I didn't like the leader. I didn't like the work that I was doing. I didn't like the team that I was on for whatever reason. So unmanageable workload in actuality isn't just a kind of a black and white, how much work do you have to get done? It's how bought in are you to the work? And all of these things kind of fall into the same line. If you have the good relationship with the leader and you have good relationship with your team, these things, it's not that they go away, it's that they're not viewed as negatively as they could be if you didn't have that support from the leader or the relationship. It's almost like, do you have the tools to solve the problem? Because inevitably they will happen. Inevitably there will be a lack of role clarity, right? Does it burn you out? I don't know. Do you have a good relationship with your leader? Because you can get rid of that lack of clarity right away. Do you have an unmanageable workload? I don't know. Do you have a good relationship with your leader? Because if you do, talk to them about it and figure out where you can, take steps to make it more manageable in the moment. It becomes burnout when you don't have that relationship. All of these things kind of fall into that same line. So I think that's really the takeaway here is don't look at these things as causes of burnout. Look at them as symptoms of the broader problem of a lack of good relationships with leaders.
Yeah, and I think the article, talks a little bit about that around like leadership starting the prevention strategies much further upstream. So to your point, like I think that you're absolutely spot on. That it's like this is, the only thing that I would say is like burnout's about your workplace. I would change that vernacular. I would say burnout's about the leadership. Like that's the reality is that the leaders bring these things to life, or the leaders lessen these things of an impact. And then to your point, I've been in exactly the same boat. I have felt sometimes that like, man, I'm being asked to do a lot more than maybe a peer of mine is doing. But I also feel like my leader is aware of that. They inspire that. They motivate me in that space. They explain to me why that's a thing. My leader will say things like, I want you to work to your potential and not measure yourself against other peers. Because I think you have more potential. Like those are things that a leader can say that will erase some of these things off the list for me to say, like, then it's all good. Like I don't need to worry about these things, or these things don't have that type of an impact on me, because I know that there is a larger picture here. There's a different level that I'm being asked to deliver upon, and I'm willing to accept that personally, because my leader is really clear about that type of work. So yeah, I agree with you, and I think that so much of this is about that understanding of if leaders are not doing the work that they should be doing with their teams in these ways, then these symptoms will start to show up. And over time, these things will definitely turn into burnout.
Yeah, and we learned from the interview that we put out with Steven Chudletsky last month on Speak Up Culture that a person's relationship with their leader has more of an impact on their overall physical and mental health than even the relationship they have with their family doctor. That came from the World Health Organization. That is absolutely true. And so if you're looking at trying to stop the burnout that might be happening in your place of work, really understand that this isn't just about, people having more grit or being able to like power through something. For a lot of people, this is having a true impact on their mental and physical health and well-being, and the broader implications of that are life and death in some situations. And for a lot of people in the last few years, with the reprioritizing of things in people's lives, a lot of people are a lot less willing to compromise those things than maybe they would have in the past. And so if you're a leader and you want to make sure that your people aren't constantly leaving or burning out, the way to do that is to look at your relationship with them and make sure that if these things, when inevitably these things rear their heads, that you and your people have the tools together to solve them, as opposed to them leading to that burnout.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.